welcome back to the broadcast. It's been a hot minute since we've had the opportunity to speak to our next guest. We absolutely love her work at Based Politics. Hannah Cox is president and co-founder of said same. She's also the owner of Athens Media, and she comes on with me today to talk about a subject that we've been discussing quite a bit over the last several weeks, and that is the Tennessee Valley Authority. Hannah joins us via Zoom for those of you watching on Talk TV. Hannah, good afternoon. How are you?
Good. Great to be with you as always.
Man, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I was a little bit surprised that we connected and you reached out and said, I want to talk about TVA. I need to talk about TVA. I've got to talk about TVA. Let's go. Let's do it. What are your, give me your overview on this.
I caught your segment with John Rich, and I was like, tap me in, boss. I want to talk about this, too. It was fantastic.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Matt, I think you and anybody who's followed me for a long time knows that I hate one person in American history above all others, and that is FDR, and TVA is one of his worst lasting legacies. I spent almost 13 years living in Nashville. I now live in Georgia, where we also have some aspects of the TVA, but we're under control, and it is just an atrocious entity. I'm fed up. I'm fed up with many of the utilities across the country in the United States where we have seen our governments give these people a monopoly for decades and decades. They have used it to abuse their consumers. They have run up the prices. The quality of the service just keeps getting worse and worse. They're enriching themselves. And then worst of all, recently, they're pushing this Trojan horse of green energy, trying to pursue types of energy that are simply not going to be sufficient to provide the amount of energy we need for our population, much less if it continues to grow. And they don't care. They continue dumping money into those endeavors versus focusing on what they're actually supposed to be dedicating their time to, which is first and foremost just delivering the product that people are forced to buy from them, but secondarily starting to work on developing nuclear energy. And so I love what I'm seeing happen right now because among wonky people, nerdy people like you and me in politics, we've hated the TVA for some time, but it was never one of those issues that really got mainstream attention for one reason or another. But lately, seeing what Trump is coming in and cleaning house over there, really putting a spotlight on all of the corruption, all of the outsourcing of our jobs that were supposed to be created here to overseas countries, many times our foreign enemies. He's put a stop to that. I love seeing the op-eds recently from the Tennessee senators calling for more reform. So it really feels like there's momentum building on this, and it's starting to actually break into the mainstream. And I think that's very exciting because this is something that has needed attention for a very long time.
Well, as someone, and Hannah does, as someone who refers to herself as a rabid capitalist, which I absolutely love, and I'm a fierce independent and a libertarian, meaning that I hate the concept of not allowing the free market to work itself out in any endeavor. The government should only be involved in those things which cannot be solved by the free market. And for the life of me, I don't know why more conservatives aren't speaking out about TVA as it exists, because not only do they not seem to care about the needs of their consumers, they run roughshod and always have over the consumers that they claim to protect and that they claim to serve. And secondarily, they're now getting into arenas that they have absolutely no business in. And I don't know if you know about the TVA's reach into broadband service, Hannah, or not, but it's like this is not even a part of your foundational document that you get into broadband service, but here we are.
Well, right. I mean, you can't even deliver the product that you're tasked with delivering efficiently. Right. Why would we give you another very essential service to get to the American people? It's ludicrous. And it makes absolutely no sense. If you can't do one thing well, you certainly shouldn't be entrusted with two things. So across the country, this is a huge issue, but TVA is the largest utility in the country. It takes up space in 7 different states. You've got millions of Americans who are forced into using it. And despite the fact that it not only continues to create blackouts and jack up its prices, it still gets that monopoly power. It can abuse people. It can have all kinds of corruption, which it has over the years, right? There's been countless scandals involving the TVA where they've actually really hurt people, made them sick, sometimes even perhaps led to their ultimate deaths. And yet they still continue to exist. You would never see that in an actual market economy. And, I'm not going to say that the private entities are perfect in this regard. Obviously, people oftentimes have issues with some of those providers as well. But it's unquestionable when you compare the two, which one is actually providing the service that it claims it exists to provide, which one's better, and which one is at least still going to be privy to market forces. It's going to have to compete with other entities. It's going to have to at least outcompete on prices and services for others in the area. The TVA doesn't have to do that. So this is an organization that would, under no circumstances, still exist had it been a free market organization. But because it's a government monopoly, they get away with highway robbery.
Well, and it's infuriating, particular to the dynamics of the Cheatham County situation as an example, but there are many, many other examples of this. The TVA comes in, they offer these perfunctory, listening sessions where they claim to care about what people have to say. But as has been exposed time and time again, they've already decided what they're going to do. They don't really care what you have to say, and they feel like there is zero that the consumer and the individuals that they're impacting can do about it.
And they're not wrong, right? They're absolutely not wrong. And we see how they've abused that kind of power. I think it's obvious if they were given the ability to operate broadband, they would do the same thing. And that would really hurt people in rural communities. So I think it's atrocious. I think it's completely ridiculous that they would even be in the running for those kinds of contracts and grants. What really needs to happen, and again, very fortunately does seem to be moving in that direction, is we need to clean house over there. They need new leadership. They need a new board. They need to get people in there who, at the very least, respect the American taxpayers, who respect market forces, who are interested in devoting their resources towards energy sources that actually will provide for the demand that we have. They've got to run the left-wing lunatics out of there. And again, this is great progress. We've seen a lot happen just in the past 5 months over there. So I'm very excited about that. This is probably the area under the Trump administration that I'm most excited about. I think his energy agenda is fantastic. I think it's exactly what our economy needs. We've got to get some breathing room in there. It will create tons of good jobs for American working class men, which is something that people are desperate for. Americans want to be involved in building things. They want to be involved in powering the economy. They don't want government handouts. They're not looking to be on the government dime, but they want to be able to go out and pursue their version of the American dream. And I think Trump's energy agenda is going to do that. And reforming the TVA is a big part of that, particularly in the Southeast.
So how much of this do you believe? I mean, I think some of it is a structural issue, just consistent with any monopoly, particularly a utility like TVA. But how much do you believe the problems existed under the previous CEO, Jeff Lyash? Lyash obviously knew the writing was on the wall when Trump won election in November. He was not planning on resigning. He decided to resign. He gave himself until the end of 2025, and then it became obvious through the Trump administration that he's about to get his ass booted out anyway. And so he goes ahead and resigns, and they bring in a new guy, I guess Dave Mole, I believe is his name. So how much do you believe? Because Lyash seemed to be all in on green. And part of the issue that I have with the Cheatham County effort is that we're closing down existing coal plants under the footprint of TVA for the purpose of opening up what is a methane plant. And the TVA people got on my butt because I kept calling it a methane plant, and they said it's natural gas. I said, well, what do you think natural gas is? That's what it is. I mean, let's call it what it is. Look, I don't have issue with methane generally speaking or natural gas generally speaking. I have issue with a monopoly taking over because they are so anti-coal. How much of this was Lyash, and how much of it do you think could be repaired when Trump eventually gets around to appointing the 5 open seats that are on the board?
Well, I think a lot of it can be repaired. I think leadership matters. I think you've had unelected bureaucrats who have been paying themselves sky-high salaries with no accountability. Again, no spotlight. This is just something people don't pay attention to because it's dry and it's wonky. And even when it is something that impacts them, they don't always necessarily understand the root cause of why that is or what's happening behind the scenes. So I do think that just Trump coming in alone and spotlighting this and elevating it, he has this really great ability to take these niche issues and get the American people to care about them. And so I think that Sunlight can do a lot. I think that that's exciting. But, to try to pin it all on the previous CEO, I think also is short-sighted. This is an agency that has had problems for decades and decades. And have they been compounding over time? Of course. The longer you have a monopoly, the worse that monopoly is going to get. But I think that as a whole, it is partly part of the nature of monopolies. And I think without a strong man really putting pressure on government monopolies and bureaucrats to perform, it's unlikely that you're going to see them really ever meet the private competitors. So, I think that good things can happen under Trump. I think that we're moving in a great direction. I do fear once Trump is gone after 4 years that you might see things quickly revert. So this certainly is not a situation where I would want to see the TVA granted new powers or given new kinds of business deals. I do think a big part of the issue that you've had in recent decades with the TVA is that, like most government agencies, for one reason or another, the bureaucrats that are attracted to it tend to be very left-wing people. They have very left-wing ideologies. And so you had a lot of people at the top who were concerned with moving green energy forward at the expense of literally everything else. And that has been atrocious because I'm supportive of free market options to address the climate, but they have to be pragmatic and they have to be laid out in a transitory fashion to where we have stepping stones to slowly progress off of things like coal. That cannot happen overnight. And really what happens when we try to force it is that we end up just sending those emissions overseas to our foreign competitors. Because when you look at who fills that void, when we prevent America from competing on that front, our competitors like Russia and Venezuela, their exports are far less clean than ours. And so what we really should be doing, ironically enough, if you care about the climate, is empowering American oil and gas to first and foremost export what they currently have, to continue to develop new technologies that could help us progress faster off of those old energy sources. They should be absolutely investing in nuclear, which I think it's fantastic that Trump is so focused on that. I think Tennessee's governor seems to be very focused on that. That's exactly the right way to approach this. But that's not what the TVA has been doing. They've been completely fumbling the ball on the nuclear agenda because they were so focused on these green initiatives, which, as you and I both know, are mostly just a Trojan horse for socialism. There was never any chance that we were going to fully move over to wind and solar and be able to meet the needs of the population. But again, they didn't care. They were willing to have blackouts. They were willing to tell people that they had to consume less energy, that they couldn't have their needs met when they needed it, and that they would have to pay a higher price in the process versus doing what they needed to do to actually develop a plan to smartly move forward. So I don't know what the long form prognosis is for the TVA. I certainly think there's encouraging things happening right now, but I think that people have to keep their foot on the gas here. And I think that we should, again, be trying to force them to focus on the power that they currently have, actually performing for the people that are forced to use them as consumers. And I don't think that we should be looking at extending their authority or the areas that they oversee.
No question about it. President and co-founder of Based Politics. She owns Athens Media. She is Hannah Cox, our guest, talking about generally the TVA and more specifically this Cheatham County deal. You mentioned nuke and small modular nuclear power is where to go. I mean, in my opinion, in my limited, I don't pretend to be the expert on this, but I've probably done more research than most. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why we don't have more politicians and more entities in favor of and vocalizing their favorite type of energy for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And it is, I mean, I'm all about oil and gas for the short term. I'm all about doing everything we can to promote free markets when it comes to renewable sources. That's all well and good. If they can find a way to make money on it, more power to them. But nuke is where it's at to me. You? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no question. We cannot progress off of things like coal without nuclear. It is a fantasy world. It is a childlike mentality for people to suggest otherwise. That is the only option on the table. And I frankly think that it's a bit sad and disappointing just how limp-wristed so many of our leaders have been around this. Yes, of course, you have to assuage concerns around nuclear. Yes, of course, there is somewhat of a threat around it, but it can be done safely. I think that has been proven out, and we need to do a better job messaging that, informing people, educating them around that, addressing the fears and concerns that they have. I also think, though, as a whole, that those fears and concerns are even overblown. I don't think this is something that the average American is really all that informed informed on or thinks that deeply about or really even knows that it's, happening in their backyard. And so I feel like it's just been a lack of political will and a lack of intentionality. I think many people on the right have kind of been asleep at the wheel. They've let the left come in and take this issue and run with it. And instead of taking it back and saying, you know what, you're right, we have to be good stewards of the climate. We need to be good stewards of our resources. We need to ensure that we are leaving a better world for our children. All of these are conservative values, but because it got branded like more left wing, they instead have been doing this like denialism thing or this, just don't want to touch it at all. And I think that that's been really short-sighted. Now we're fortunately seeing people start to wake up and realize that this is something the right can and should be leading on, because there are actual solutions that are under our ideology that will do a far better job of actually creating a better world in the future. And again, of even creating more clean energy right now, because we've let the left push this narrative that something's wrong with American oil and gas and that something's wrong with what we're doing. We've let people shame us and make us feel bad. But again, if you look at what our energy sector has already done, we are running circles around the rest of the world in this regard. I mean,
Amen.
We already are the leaders on climate reform and actually taking care of the world, and we should be proud of that. And I think that there's just there's kind of a void. There's been a void of.
And not to interrupt you, but for the do-gooders, I mean, and I say that with love, for those that genuinely believe that utilizing coal as an energy source is somehow killing the world, I would say to them, no amount of energy reduction in the coal on the coal footprint in America is going to change what you believe is killing the earth if you don't get a handle on China. And we don't control the rest of the globe, and India for that matter. And for that reason alone, we need to be energy competitive with those nations and advance the cause of finding new sources of energy for the long-term future. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. No notes, Matt. 100% agreed.
Love it. Listen, Hannah, great stuff as always. I invite people to follow you, Hannah D. Cox, if they don't already. Love your follow on the X Machine. Thank you for everything. Where else can people find you? If you Substack, I assume?
Well, thanks so much, Matt. I love and appreciate your work as well. They can find me at Hannah D. Cox on just about every social media platform. I also did just restart my Substack, so if they want to head over, they can find the links right at the top of my Twitter, or I think they can just search Hannah Cox on Substack as well. And
you're highlighting on your X Machine, and I absolutely love it. If there was yet another reason to love our man Donald Trump, he's stopping the animal testing. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yes. Yeah, that's been incredible. We've seen a record number of these contracts that we were funding, taxpayer-funded contracts to torture animals in China, right? We're still doing the same stuff we did before the pandemic, same kind of research, same kind of corruption, and Trump has just come in and cleaned house. The White Coat Waste Project is an organization I'm a fellow for that has been highlighting these contracts, shedding light on them, and elevating them, and working with the Trump administration to cut those dollars. So people should definitely check them out as well if they're interested in those issues.
Hannah, as always, thank you for the conversation. We'll do it again soon.
Thanks so much, Matt.